In the Bennet family there were 5 daughters. They lived in Longbourn in the Regency times. Sons were to inherit, daughters were to marry, but would only accept if provided with money. The story begins with a man named Bingley, who had an eye for the eldest daughter. Gentle and sweet, but beauty was her charm. Mr. Bingley danced with the beautiful Jane twice, while his friend Darcy was as cold as ice. Bingley wondered why he wasn't with Lizzie. The second eldest daughter wasn't handsome enough. Jane is invited to the Bingleys' estate. She becomes sick, much to Miss Bennet's delight. Lizzie goes to visit her sister Jane. Throughout the visit, Darcy learns of Lizzie and his affections for her begin to bloom. A month later, Mr. Collins arrives. He is a fool and a bit of a tool. Looking for a wife, switched from Jane to Lizzie, but Lizzie had eyes for a man named Wickham. Wickham told Lizzie of all the stories, which made her hate Mr. Darcy even more. The Netherfield ball, attended by all, Mr. Wickham's absence has Lizzie sad. Darcy asks to dance, which makes her really mad. Lizzie is humiliated throughout the night. The next day, Mr. Collins awakes. He goes on one knee and pops the question. Lizzie rejects and Miss Bennet's distressed. Jane receives a letter Mr. Bingley has left. Jane's upset and Elizabeth's angry. Charlotte stole the hand of Mr. Collins. Jane receives a letter from Caroline Bingley. Mr. Bingley has left and ain't returning. Mr. and Mrs. Garner arrive at Longbourn. They spend Christmas, then steal Jane away. The newlyweds head to Hunsford. Elizabeth joins later in March. The party is invited to dine at Rosings, where Lady Catherine de Bourgh awaits. A tall woman with cruel manners. As the night proceeds, Lizzie is shamed. Later that week they return again, where Darcy and his cousin join to dine. Darcy and Lizzie begin to converse, and Darcy admits he is quite the shy. On one visit to the parsonage, Darcy declares his love for Lizzie. Initially flattered, she turns him down, blames him for Wickham and Bingley's absence. The next day, Darcy gives her a letter, explaining the truth of Wickham and Bingley. Lizzie is aware of her false judgments. Back at Longbourn, Lizzie tells Jane, but doesn't explain about Bingley's departure. Lydia leaves to Brighton and flirts with the boys. Lizzie and the Garners head to Pembrey. The Garners and Lizzie visit Miss Darcy. When they leave, Miss Bingley mocks Lizzie, but Darcy starts to feel a little dizzy. Elizabeth finds 2 letters from Jane. George Wickham and Lydia had run away. There is no word from the couple. But Lizzie and the Garners head back home. Lizzie learns her dad has gone after Lydia. And of course, Miss Bennet is hysterical. Mr. Garner heads to London and is unsuccessful. 2 days later, Mr. Bennet returns. Edward writes that the couple had been found, but Wickham will marry only for some pounds. The Bennets assume the Garners have paid. Later that day, Elizabeth realizes that she is in love with Mr. Darcy. After the marriage, the couple arrives. Lydia says that Darcy was at the wedding. Elizabeth received a letter from her uncle. Darcy went to London to locate the couple. He tried to convince Lydia to leave, but that didn't happen, so he paid Mr. Wickham. 3 days later, the boys come to town. Bingley visits the Bennets a few days later. He asks Mr. Bennet for Jane's hand in marriage. Lady Catherine de Bourgh unexpectedly visits. Darcy and Anne are intended for each other. Lizzie refuses to stay away from Darcy. Later that week, they go for a walk. Darcy and Lizzie lag behind. He tells Lizzie his feelings have not changed, and Lizzie lets him know that she feels the same. After their walk, Darcy visits Mr. Bennet. He asks for his consent to marry Lizzie. Mr. Bennet accepts and they live happily ever after.